Hello, everyone. I'm Ernie Humphrey, the CEO of Treasury Webinars. I would like to thank everyone for taking the time to join us for our webinar today, the How and Why of Payments, Survey Insights, Metrics, and Best Practices. Before we get started, I want to thank our webinar partner today, Stamply, whose strong commitment to thought leadership and serving the AP, Finance, and Treasury professions helps us make this webinar possible today. Now that technology is offering companies visibility into all aspects of accounts payable, it is time for companies to take more control of how they make payments. Different payment types vary in terms of processing cost and risk exposures. Today, it's my pleasure to review the key results of the initial payment strategy, how and why companies make payments survey, which had well over 400 responses from Treasury and Finance leaders across the United States. The missions of this survey are to help Treasury and Finance better understand the how and why of payments and deliver insights into how companies can achieve payment type optimization. A few quick notes about the objectives of the survey. The objectives of the survey were to benchmark how companies are currently making payments, i.e. checks, ACH, credit card, virtual card, ghost card. Determine if companies track how they make payments. Determine how companies choose how they make payments. Assess the role of supplier relationships in managing how payments are made to suppliers, and to assess the role of technology in managing supplier payments. Before we get started, a few housekeeping items. Those of you who are interested in receiving CTP credits for today's webinar, please send an email to Ernie@treasurywebinars.com. Again, that's Ernie@treasurywebinars.com. Also, if you would like a copy of today's slide deck, please send me that information as well. And please note that the full survey report will be available on Stamply.com. Stay tuned on that one. Also, I appreciate everyone's consideration in answering all of our polling questions here today. If you're interested in receiving CTP credits for today's webinar today, you'll have to answer all the polling questions, stay on for the duration of the webinar, pay attention during the webinar, and answer the short survey that will follow immediately at the conclusion of the webinar today. We always strive to improve the ROI we offer our event attendees for their valuable time, especially important in our post-COVID world, because we've all had so many Zoom meetings and webinars, and aren't we all happy to be on Ernie's webinar today, because Ernie's actually halfway entertaining, as far as I tell myself every day, right? All right, so let's dive in. So let's talk about our learning objectives. What is my promise to you in investing an hour of your valuable time today? I want you to be able to understand current trends and how payments are being made, right? And that's so important. I want you to do it twice. I want you to also identify specific opportunities to be more strategic relative to how your companies make payments, and identify specific opportunities to be more strategic. So it was so important. I put those twice, and you know me, that was on purpose. So what's our agenda for today? How are we going to accomplish our objectives today? Well, first of all, we're going to dive into payment strategy and the key survey themes. And so for me, those of you who know me know that I've really gotten back into the world of Treasury, and especially AP and payments the past few years. And so as a Treasury manager, I have to confess, I wasn't really all that strategic. I didn't really track how we made payments, why we made payments, why did we write checks, why did we do ACH, could we be more efficient in that? And as I've really been out in the educational world, I've always had the view that checks are evil. So I kind of wanted to look into that, right? I wanted to say, if checks are so evil, then why are people continuing to write checks? So it's a mystery to me, and it's a mystery to our folks across the pond, because they chastise us because we write checks. But I'm here to tell you, one, that checks are not evil, and also that there are reasons that we write checks. And so one of the things that I'm working with the Stamply to do is to help people do checks more efficiently. And so it's not that we want everyone to write checks all the time. Absolutely not. ACH, right, is very efficient as well, and that done right is probably the low-cost fruit. But I've also seen a lot of press that I don't agree with, trying to get people to convert their suppliers to virtual cards, and there are consequences to doing that. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that, but AP is not a profit center. And so I wanted to take a deep dive in that. Along those lines, I wanted to look at virtual and ghost cards, trends and truth. Like I said, absolutely have benefits. However, there are consequences and they could damage supplier relationship. And then we'll get into the why of payments, right? Why are companies choosing payments and how are they collaborating with suppliers? And then let's look at supplier relationships and trends and opportunities. And then we'll wrap things up with some key takeaways. Now, I know everyone is going to be disappointed if I don't ask a polling question, so bear with me. Not too many polling questions. I want to get a sense of the audience in terms of how many invoices that you process a month. And so as I kind of dive into the content, I know where to focus our attention today. So I appreciate everyone's consideration in taking our survey here. Today, those of you interested in receiving CTP credits, you'll have to answer all of our polling questions today. Again, the email relative to CTP questions is Ernie, E-R-N-I-E, at treasurywebinars.com. Again, I love everyone to answer all of our survey questions today. Also, I can take your questions in the questions area of your GoToWebinar control panel anytime during the webinar. I'll do my best if we have time at the end of the webinar to address your questions during the webinar. However, if they're not, you know I'll follow up with you directly afterwards. And if there's questions related to something that we're seeing today that I can't answer, I will get you connected with the right people. So let's go ahead and leave the polling question up for another few seconds or so. I know there's a little lag, so I'll give you 5 seconds. We've got a really good response rate, 82%, 83%. Let's get that even higher. So, and then we'll take a quick peek at the results and kind of see where we're at, and then we'll start diving in to some of the survey results and trends and overviews. And I was extremely excited at the demographics that we had, and some of the insights were really surprising to me, and I think it's going to take us all in a different direction. So I think it's incredibly important. So let's go ahead and take a quick peek at the results. I think we've got a pretty good spread, right? I mean, we've got 42% over 1,000, right? So we've got 55% with over 500 or more. So that's really good. You know, that's a really good volume. And then even if I want to comment, even if you have less than 200 invoices, it's not necessarily the number, right? It's the complication of your invoices, right? There could be many different segments. They could be going overseas. And so just because you don't do a lot of invoices doesn't mean that leveraging technology and optimizing your payment types is not worth it for you to invest in knowing how to do that and why to do that. So thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time to answer our questions. And so just a little bit of a survey overview. My friends at Stamply were kind enough to partner with me to conduct a survey to help us better understand the how and why of payments and deliver insights into how companies can achieve payments type optimization. All of you that have AP automation already or are looking at it, you know, here it's the last mile of accounts payable. And again, I'll confess, when I was a treasury manager, I don't think I paid enough attention, you know, on that last mile. We actually have more survey responses than on the screen, so I'm happy to report that. So I believe we are over. We're well over 400, as a matter of fact, and we have a really good tilt in terms of across the enterprise. But I'm really happy. Where we see a lot of traction in AP automation is in the mid-market space, and I think we're really close to having 200 or more just in that space. And so when you get the survey results, we're going to help you do more apples to apples, because where you stand depends on where you sit a little bit. So thank you to Stamply for partnering with me. I'm taking a look at the top 5 industries. We were a little top heavy on banking and financial services, software technology, professional services, healthcare, insurance, manufacturing. I was really happy to see our distribution right across number of employees. So we had a really good swag. You know, what's your definition of mid-market? I think my friends at Stamply and I were really focused. We'd say mid-market is between 100 and 1,000, but the good news is we've got 28%, right? That's actually above that. And then we've got some folks that aren't quite as big. So I'm actually thrilled with those. And then our job titles, I was a little bit pleasantly surprised. And there are a lot of accounting managers that are really involved in the payments front. And that was a little bit news to me, because shame on me, I've been in Treasury for a long time now. We have directors of finance, CFO, and we've also got our treasurers. It's like, well, there's not as many treasury people as I thought. Well, I used to think that would be surprising, but as I've started to look at where payments is, accounts payable really doesn't fall under the umbrella of Treasury, and there's not as much collaboration between AP and Treasury as we all would have liked. And so Again, I love to learn every day. That's why I wake up every day. So I learned that among many other things. But I was really, really thrilled. Those of you that know me, this is really only my second survey in the Treasury arena. I did a Treasury survey with APQC, which was also fantastic. And this is my, I'm going to be doing a series of payment surveys. And I think Stampy and I are really going to shine the light in some compelling areas to myself, but also across the world in terms of payment types. And so let's look at our top 5 survey themes. Again, checks are evil and here to stay. So those of you who follow me on LinkedIn know that I've had some interesting conversations already, especially with my friends across the pond, because they get really irritated that we write checks. However, I hope they're on this webinar because you're going to understand why that's the case. In the US, again, I'm not saying we should all write checks. I'm just saying that some of us are going to write checks. It's kind of like Excel, right? We're in love with Excel. We know Excel. Let's make sure that our folks are leveraging Excel as efficiently as possible. And then let's do checks, right, as well as possible. And then, by the way, what I'll show you, technology, really a lot of the things that I like that I'm seeing in the check space, which makes them not evil, is it works for ACH as well. And for me, selfish motive, is I was a treasury manager, the approval side, right, was always incredibly inefficient. So it wasn't just the folks in AP, but the other folks involved in the approval process and the other places where there were risk exposures. And the leading technology that's out there right now that we're seeing, it really brings invoices to life, checks to life, allows us to mitigate risk and also mitigate right, the cost of checks. So again, I almost say checks are probably a necessary evil. And so, so let's do them as well as possible. I'm going to say that over and over for the next year. So you're just going to have to get used to it, because when you see how many checks are still out there, we have been doing a disservice just blanketly saying that we shouldn't write checks. The second theme is ghosts and virtual cards. They're overhyped. I'm not surprised by this. Again, I'm a working capital guy. I'm a treasury guy. I think they have tremendous value, but I don't really think that the folks issuing them understand the costs and benefits. And I know that the people that are accepting them don't understand the costs and benefits. Almost a big part of that is how much are the companies that are trying to get you to move folks to virtual and card payments. Some of the folks which are really payments providers and not really AP automation expertise, right? They're getting you to push this on your customers, and it can cause damage to your relationships. And then we see the reasons for making payments are diverse. I was a little bit surprised by this, and so I thought it was always cost. So that's going to be interesting. And then a little bit disappointing me. It looks like companies track how they make payments, but there's not a lot of purpose to it, right? So if you look at the incentives that they might have, you'll see that it really doesn't align with how they're making payments. The good news is that companies are tracking how they make payments, but I don't know if anyone's looking at it. I'm almost positive a lot of people in Treasury aren't looking at it. And so there's no real goal. So what I like to tell folks is your payments mix, ACH, credit cards, this should be like your 401k portfolio, right? We should have targets. This is how many checks we're going to write. This is how many whatever. And it becomes, it's a KPI, right? I want to move from maybe 30% checks to 20%, but that 20%, I just need it to do business right now. Eventually we'll do that. How about we ACH? And then we have to look at each supplier. You don't want to push a payment type, right? You have to make sure that they're ready for it. So again, this is really, I'm excited, as you can tell, as always, but this survey was incredibly exciting to me. And so checks are not evil. I think I have a little graphic there. Confess, my friends at Stamply put this together for me. I love it. Kind of on the bottom, I think we've all been pushing that. But I think I'm going to show you today. Ernie's going to have his halo on. Everyone's like, oh, well, this would be interesting. So preferred way to pay supplier. So we asked the companies, this about knocked me out of my seat. 30%, right? Prefer to write checks. So again, 30% prefer. So that gives us a reason, right? If we have ACH, 24% credit card payment, I would have thought this would have been higher credit card payment. And these numbers are really low on 4%. So this may be a little bit of a more mix towards virtual or ghost card payments, especially given what I saw in terms of how many people are offering ghost cards. And then 5%, they really have no preference. And for me, you know what I'm going to say, ugh, if that's the case, we have to do some homework for you. And this is another reason that checks are here to stay. And this is it right here. You can print this slide off. You can take it in. we can take this to all these folks that say checks are going away in the next year, 2 years, 5 years. Ain't happening. What percentage of your company payments are made by checks? Between 25 and 50%, 29%, 21%, 50. So 34%, at least 50%, right? 34, oh, this is going to be hard math. 34 and 29, 73%, at least 25%. How many less than 10%? Only 14%. I think that number is actually a little bit lower when I really aggregate up the rest of the data that I've recently collected. So it's 10%. So less than 10%, right? And I know you got to be careful, Lauren. You don't generalize from the survey, right, across the whole world, but it's not going to be that different. So even if it's 20%, 30%, 40%, 50%, only less than 10%. And so if you think about that, even if it's 10%, it's still, right, 10 checks a year, 20 checks a year, 50 checks a year, 100 checks a year. So that's a big number done inefficiently. And so, like it or not, folks, checks are here to stay. So let me kind of show you a little bit of what's out there in terms of some leading technology that's been really exciting for me to see firsthand. So I've had the opportunity to work with Stamply, who's my strategic partner. Don't worry, Ernie is still technology agnostic. And so really what I've seen in terms of what's been going on in terms of the technology, innovation in terms of the way checks are processed, we're able to have much more workflow efficiency. When I worked in Treasury, they do check runs. I'd have to sign every check over $5,000. Guess what? We had 2 signatures over $5,000. If I wanted to look at the backup, right, I had to go over to AP, go in the drawer, look at the desk, and my name was always on that approval. And so technology has given us the workflow efficiency, but also related to my last comments, approvals that matter. So if I'm just sitting there scribbling my name on a check, even though I'm the treasury manager, the CFO, does that really matter? Sorry, it doesn't, folks. That's just life. And then the other great thing is the audit efficiency. And so internal audit, external audit, we're able to track these transactions from A to Z. So what you'll be able to see here is just a payment detail page. So incredibly powerful. And this is what I think, one of the things I'll show you, the next slide gets me even more excited. So I'll try and calm down, is you have the invoice. You can pull it up from one spot. You're in the system. You can pull up the spot. You can see pending approver. Here's Bob the approver, like Bob the builder, right? And then this is a dual control. So it shows you, right, that there's controls there. And then there's approve, reject, right? And then, you have the bank information, the date, right? Vendor details here. And then you've got the invoice number. So this will be incredibly powerful to me. So when I was in Treasury, yes, I was a pain controlling cash, right? That's our job. So I would say, what is that? That seems kind of odd to me. I don't know why we're paying these guys. So I really want to see that, but I'm going to confess. Sometimes I would be like, I don't feel like going over to accounts payable and digging through a drawer for 20 minutes to find this. Here we go. Here's another piece, which is invoices to life. This is exciting to me, and anyone in AP should get excited if you've ever been in the weeds. But this is cool, right? You can get into the invoice detail. Look at this live communication here. And some companies are turning this on where they can communicate with their suppliers as well. And so it brings this invoice to life. It brings this check to life. The same thing with an ACH. And so you can see it. You can see authorized for payment. You can drill down in the invoice. You can click in the invoice. You can go look at the POs. You can do whatever that you want, right? There's items here. You can look at the GL accounts, right? You can see the class. You can see the location. You can see the department. And so you're like, man, Ernie, I really don't need all that information. And said, yeah, but what happens when you do want to see it? What happens when your auditors want to see it? And so I think what you'll see, in addition to the what you normally think of the people that are having the pain points, and that's what drives up the cost a lot, inefficiency of those involved and communication with your suppliers. But people like me who are approvers, they will love this. And the cool thing, I'm not trying to toot the Stamply horn too much, but the cool thing about Stamply, the reason that it came about was that the CEO was a CFO, and he just was horrified about AP and how payments were made and AP was done. And so I think you'll be able to see that. But again, the authorization process, it matters, and you have your workflow efficiency there. Again, checks, and ACH, and approvals that matter. And then that audit efficiency, maybe it's gotten better from back in the day, but I used to spend so much time pulling data and communicating with auditors. And so this is really exciting to me. And then just one more thing in terms of your payment processing, the visibility. Again, you can drill into the invoice again, and then you can see, right, the whole process, right, of what's payment processing. Maybe you want to go in there. Maybe you're worried that you're running tight on cash. I think I know what's in AP, but I don't. So I don't want to make a borrowing decision. That's wrong, right? I don't want to do an FX transaction. So we can have the invoice, who's the vendor, right? What's the date? And maybe you can go down the subsidiary. This is bank information, which we're going to have control over, the payment date and the amount. And so again, you can drive into all these tabs. So I would encourage anyone to spend a few minutes and learn a little bit more about this. And just in terms of check efficiency, if I was a treasury manager and I knew that we could do this with checks, I would be on the phone with someone that can do this for me. And then there's so much more. That's just kind of the icing on the cake, so to speak. And it gives you control. So what I'll talk about a little bit later is you don't want to force payment types. You want to collaborate, right, with your suppliers. You don't want to damage those supplier relationships. You want to make sure they understand the costs and benefits, right? Make sure that it's got to be a win-win situation. So let's talk about virtual and ghost cards. This interesting adoption trends, I was surprised. 61% of companies, they make those ghost card payments. And then I was surprised by this as well. Does your company have a program to support convert suppliers? That was again over 60%, 63%. And then does your AP payment solution provider help you convert suppliers to accepting these payments, types of payments, and at 67%. And so to me, again, I've been especially in the AP automation space for probably the last 3 years. I speak all the time. I'm asked to speak all the time still. This always concerned me a little bit. And so as I put my treasury hat on, I was always like, you know what? Do I really want people communicating with my suppliers? Can I control that messaging? Are my suppliers educated? And I'm not saying that there may be a provider or two out there that does this right, lets you approve the communication, works with you, has a strategy, but I think that would be the exception rather than the rule. So let's be careful here. Again, let's make sure it makes sense. Let's make sure that our suppliers are making educated decisions, and so are we, right? If we're being told how much benefit it is for us getting these rebates, let me ask you this question: how much money are you guys making, right, on converting our suppliers for us? I think that'll open your eyes. Here's what I call the truth matters. A question, just kind of a sentiment. I understand how much my company is getting versus what my AP solution provider is getting. Oh no, 27%, it's actually closer to 30% with all the results. 30% can neither agree or disagree or strongly disagree. So 30%, right? If I was a person who was offering these payments types and pushing them, not offering them, pushing them, I would be a little concerned about this. So this is Houston. Sorry to pick on Houston and any of my high radius friends out there. Houston, we have a problem on this one. And this one is even more disturbing to me. My suppliers understand the actual costs and potential benefits. Again, there's 30%. And so not only do the companies not issuing them understand them, the people that are getting them don't understand them. And so this offers me concern. And this is probably, again, I'm not trying to pick on virtual and ghost cards, but I tell it like it is. This one is also disturbing. How would you characterize your success at converting suppliers to virtual and ghost card payments versus what you were promised? And we see here 60% of companies conveyed that the success of their programs fell short of what was promised to them. So I'm not saying you shouldn't issue these cards. I'm not saying that your suppliers are trying to do something nefarious or your solution providers, but let's take a step back. If you already have this in place, let's take a deeper dive if we understand that. If you're getting ready to go down this path, let's make sure that you understand, right, the costs and benefits, and that your suppliers understand. And be careful with those supplier communications. You need to own those, right? You can't afford to damage those relationships. Now let's take a quick peek at the why of payment. So this was always curious to me. So I was like, why do people write checks? Right. So this is cool. Understanding the why. And this one, I was pleasantly surprised. Does your company track how you make payments by type? And so that was cool. So we had 89% of them track the payment type here. And then this is just what we showed earlier, the preference for making payments, which was 30%. You're understanding the why. And then what's the reason that your company prefers to make a specific payment type? So we're doing 30% checks. So why are we doing that? Only 46% listed processing costs, which I would have thought would have been higher. It's a preference of our suppliers. I guess when I think about it, that's kind of a cool thing, right? We want to collaborate with our suppliers. Oh, here's where Ernie's going to shake his head, right? It's the way we've always done payments. It's convenient for us. No real reason. So we've got, and again, there you could select more than one payment types. I know who's out there saying that's more than 100%. And I'm like, yeah, I know it's not more than 100%. So it could have been more than one reason there. But what we'll see is only 46%, right? Even though you could select multiple items there. And so I think we still have a lot of, so there's a lot of inertia, right? Inherent barriers, right? To getting companies off payments. And then also on the other side, companies actually prefer to be paid that way still. Part of that's for remittance information. Part of it is right on the receiving end, so there's a lot of inertia out there. And so we want to remove the inertia, right? But if you see the magnitude of it, it's not going away. So to continue to ignore that, so every year that you continue writing these checks, you're wasting tens, at least thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And we can also get you to ACH, right, when that makes sense. And then my company collaborates with suppliers. And so this would be another reason I would think why. This 52% say they let the suppliers choose, right? Somewhat, it was agree, yes, somewhat. We ask them, work with them, not really. Not really, we pressure them. No, we just pay them in the way that we want to. And so, right, there's only 2% of us that are collaborating with them. And I guess I should have worded this a little bit differently. But I think it would be more around if you agree that your supplier understands the benefits, and you could convey the benefits to them. There are benefits to virtual cards and ACH, right? You just need to get them the remittance information, right? And they can get predictability, right, when they're going to get paid, which is probably really important now, with COVID and let's not play the float. I told myself I wouldn't say the word float, but I couldn't help myself. So just interesting, understanding the why. And then this one was really, it's surprising to me. Does your company estimate how much it costs to process checks? 77% said yes. How much it costs to process an ACH? Yes. Process a card payment? Yes. But then if we go back and we look at, we look at our next slide and say, oh, okay, that's cool. Well, first of all, this is really interesting. So, okay, then that means, since they're tracking it, that this should be driving them, right, how they make payments. And only 46% of those companies said, right, that a processing cost was a matter. And so interesting to see how much it costs your company to process the checks. Again, there's some correlations here, so I don't want to get too far on the inferences side. But I think what we'll see here is there's a 30% of companies that are really efficient at making payments, right? So less than $5 across the board. So if you're there, congratulations, because that's awesome. But then you start to see, right, on the other side of it, pretty consistent. But the point being is, and one of the things on the check side is some people might not be estimating, right, the actual cost to writing a check. We have to compare apples to apples. But the point is that, okay, this is the current state of the union, right? This is how many checks we write. This is how many ACHs we do. This is how many card payments we make. This is how much it costs us, right? So let's look at what happens if we look at doing a better job of optimizing our payments. Okay, why are we writing checks? Can we reduce the number of checks? Can we be more efficient, right? So what's the benefits of going from 40% checks to 30% checks? Okay, that's part of it. Okay, well, what's the benefits, 30% checks making 10% to ACH. And so let's look at, here's our current allocation. what's our target allocation and what's the benefits there in terms of cost. When we look at cost, we have to look at opportunity costs, right? And we may have to invest in the technology, but I've found very few cases where I've spoken to folks that have actually taken a deep dive in looking at if it makes sense for them to automate all or part of their process, and very seldom have I seen someone fall short. And then the other side of it is you really need to look at, right, what are you trying to accomplish here? If you want to just optimize your payments, that's a different question. Do you want to optimize accounts payable? Do you want to consider a P2P and beyond P2P, which is what I consider AP all the way through? Then you want to look at that. You want to look at flexibility, right? In terms of, you know, how you make payments. Can someone facilitate payments for you? Yes, but let's not have them make that choice away from you. And then let's also let's also look at when our companies that we're processing, right? Let's make sure that we own this data. And I'm going to confess here, I learned something recently that just about horrified me. So, and I don't know which suppliers they are exactly, but I have my sources, and I'm not going to mention them. So there are some companies, they will do an ACH batch for you, but they're only sending them to the bank, right, as one number. And then they're not giving you the corresponding like reconciliation data. You can't get that back from the bank. And so, you know, it's kind of hard to reconcile your bank accounts, right, when they're hoarding, it's your data, right? And so anyway, I'm not going to mention that, but reconciliation is also a piece when you're looking at how and why you're making those payments. And reconciliation on your side and your supplier side is a reason why there's a payments preference, but that's another webinar for us, right? So let's look at supplier relationships and opportunities. And I've been on my soapbox for this for probably the last couple years because I think it's tremendously important that we value our relationships as much as we focus on our customers and suppliers, especially during this time. We may have had interruptions. There's issues being paid and getting paid, you know, that COVID has taught us. So let's go ahead. I know you're all like, I know I want to have another polling question. So before we go on, I could have asked this earlier, but I want to give us a little break to share with you my compelling story. I just want to also level set where you're at, right, in terms of AP automation. You have a solution in place, you're happy with it. You have a solution in place, you're not too happy, you're actively looking, right? You're going to take a look, right? Maybe in 2021. Get that back on the radar. Maybe you were a little bit hesitant to COVID, but then you realize COVID's not going away. It's really painful. And then you don't see the value of AP automation. And those of you who fall on that, I would love to have a conversation with you after the webinar is over. I think I can convince you in 5 minutes that you might want to take a peek at that. So I'm going to go ahead, leave the polling question up for another 10 seconds or so. Again, those of you interested in receiving CTP credits, you'll have to answer all the polling questions today. I'd love to get everyone to answer the polling question today. Also, I'll do a better job this year in aggregating some of the polling data that we have and sharing that in some posts on LinkedIn and some blogs as well. So let's go ahead and leave the polling question up a little bit lower of a percentage than we saw last time. So those of you interested in receiving CTP credits, wake up, wake up, wake up. So you got like 5 more seconds left. I don't want you to complain that you couldn't answer the question. So we're all here to learn. CTP credits are the icing on the cake, right? So let me go ahead and close the polling question. Let's take a quick peek just because I know you're interested. So 56% of you are happy in the solution in place. So I'm glad that you have a solution in place, and I'm glad that you're happy. And I hope that you're happy even after the webinar is over, but I would venture that after you've seen some of the things that I've shown you that you might not be as happy as you thought you were. The good news is it's not tremendously painful to change. You deserve the best of the best. You certainly deserve an AP automation solution that was designed, right, for all aspects of AP automation. And then we have 14% actively looking, hopefully will help you in your decision process. And then those of you in 20%, I'm excited that we're giving you some tools, right? A little bit different spin on things than you would see on how to look at the ROI and to your choice. Happy to have a conversation with you as well. So thank you so much, everyone. I really appreciate you taking a few moments to answer the polling question. And so let's take a look at some trends and opportunities. Again, important to me, supplier relationships matter. You should invest in those. You should have maybe a supplier scorecard as well. We all need to be good customers. How would you characterize the current overall state of your company's relationships with suppliers? Those of you on my webinars know that we've seen this before. 38% ideal. I hope that's the case. I certainly do. But I think that's a little bit optimistic. 47% you can do better, right? So let's do better, right? For me, how can I help you do better? Well, part of the way you can do better is getting visibility. And so kind of what I showed you earlier about all the visibility that you have, into the process as well. We'll talk a little bit about that, but as you look at these vendor portals and things like that, that's an awesome tool to use. And so good, but we can do better, right? How do you do better? So at least 60% of folks on the survey, right? We can do better. And so let us help you do that. This was the one that was a little disturbing to me. So the technology we use to manage accounts payable, almost 30% hinders relationships with suppliers. So how that's disturbing. I would show this, right, to my CFO if I'm not the CFO and say, and explain to them, if you believe this, and I have no doubt that more than 30% of you feel this way, why is that? And why are you allowing that? And what are the implications of that, right? We should be at 34%, right? The right solution with the right partner can help the quality of your relationships with suppliers. However, if you force your suppliers to take virtual cards or ghost cards, you're going to negate that. So to me, I always want to look at technology. And so we didn't dive into what type of technology, that's in the survey, but hinders relationships with suppliers. And so I think part of it is we don't realize that that's the case. We should never accept that. What would happen, and this probably only happened about 5 or 10 years ago, if you said that your technology hinders your relationship with your customers, you know how long it would take you to get that check signed? It better not take you very long. Your company's going out of business. And then in terms of mitigating costs and risk on the little bit of technology innovation, right? We talked about some of the visibility, more of a vendor portal, a place for collaboration, right? There's no middle person in the middle. What really builds relationships? I mean, I should say what hinders relationships a lot from what I've seen in my career is asymmetry of information. And so when your suppliers aren't looking at the same information as you are, that causes problems. If you can't look at dispute, right, resolution, efficiency, why do you keep having the same like phone calls over and over, right? Why? You don't, and so, and also as I mentioned earlier, you want to make sure that you own all of your data for every transaction, that it's imported and exported. Again, I'm not going to name names, but I've been surprised when I've really taken a deep dive, and maybe this is on more of the middle market solutions and a little bit smaller companies, but there are firms out there that are not doing that. And you can say, yeah, it should be in your SLA. And I said, and I agree with you, but in some cases it's not. So one of the things you want to do, if you have an AP automation solution provider, you need to take a look at your agreements in place and make sure that you own that data. If you don't own that data, tell them I'm going to own that data or I'm going to leave, because you should. You should absolutely not have any issues with your data. So this is also some opportunities just to give you a little bit more. You're probably not surprised, but which are the following: experience with suppliers, right? More information, 43%, 51% timing, obviously. Discounted related issues, 26% were on the phone. Clarification of information, right? Requesting the same information. And so I know I talk pretty quickly, but if you just take a look here, you start to see information, discount related issues, clarification, requesting the same information. What's causing that? Lack of visibility, asymmetries of information, right? And then if you don't like the timing of a payment, right, it happens, right, frequently. Well, part of that is the communication. You could probably do things. You got to take away, right, the excuses, right? I'd love to pay you in this time, but I can't, right? Maybe you can't process it. Maybe they can't receive it, right? And then how does your company communicate? How does your company choose to pay suppliers? Again, we have some strange results there. So let me go ahead and wrap things up a little bit, and then we'll actually have time for Q&A, and you guys are all like, wow, that's pretty amazing. It's been about 6 months since that happened. So let me go ahead and give you the key takeaways here before I go ahead and take some question. Checks are here to stay, right? I'm sorry, especially for my folks overseas. Stop making fun of us. You have better reasons to make fun of us now because of our government and all that good stuff. Checks are here to stay. So companies, you need to invest in the right technology to mitigate the cost and risk exposures related to paying by check. And so, yes, there are risk exposures to paying by check, but we're going to pay by check. So we want to have the approval process in place, right? Those signatures. Before I got into Treasury and until I started signing checks, I really didn't, have much appreciation for one, the control that signature has makes you feel good at night, but also on the fraud side, how disturbing it is to see your name on a check that you didn't write. And so there are fraud protections in place. So this technology does not take away your positive pay and the other things that you're doing. But as we've all learned, especially since the beginning of the year, as we've all had to work from home, some of our in-person controls, they've gone away and they're not possible. So we need to leverage technology. We need to be able to be as efficient as possible in any business environment. So most of us are not at work. We haven't been at work. And so I think we're really transitioning to this hybrid environment. And so, especially those of us who may have done what I call back office tasks, that's going to be done remotely. And so we need to make sure we have our controls in place. And let's note this, there are risk exposures related to every payment type. And AFP has a great frauds and control survey. So do our friends at Strategic Treasure. I've done webinars on that. If you want some information on that, please let me know. Another big piece of that is business email compromise scams. We need to make sure that all of the people involved in payments understand the risk exposure. We need to understand, all of our employees understand the exposures of social media, not only at work, outside of work. We need to teach them emails. And so all those things are risk related. Cost, right? We need to understand what that cost might be. There's a lot of resources that tell us how to build that cost up. There's cost calculators. You need to make sure you get into the hard dollar cost, but also the opportunity costs. And so one of the things that I tell people when I look at AP automation is, if I've started to get more involved in that, is if you look at the time that's wasted on low value add activities, it's just incredible. The opportunity cost of that time being in a more strategic activity, which may be better supplier relationships. And you might be able to convert folks to ghost cards if they understand, right, what the benefit is of them. And that's a benefit. What about trends? Well, how about we help our people negotiate contracts better? How about we get them focused on more value add activities, so they can become more business savvy, communicate with impact, and then AP becomes a place where people want to launch their careers and they're empowered because they have analytical skills, they have communication skills. Now we want AP people to move up into Treasury, into the CFO role, and so that's incredibly important. And then companies need to better leverage the information they're tracking related to how they make payments. And so again, I was really happy to see, it's like anything else, a metric that you have, you're measuring it. Why? Are you using it? Is it impacting your decisions? If it's not impacting your decisions, then why are you doing it? Information is just information. There's some business intelligence there, right? If you track how you're making payments, do you track it? Do you report on it? Do you have goals? You should have an environment of continuous improvement. And I would argue that you should be looking at that, right, on at least a yearly basis. Now the technology is changing. And when you're looking at your provider partners, you want to ask them questions, right? How much time, how is your software developed, right? Is it done in-house? Is it outsourced? How are you developing your technology? What's your functionality? What's your overall goal? And they should be sharing with you, and they shouldn't be hiding things from you, such as how much money they're making by certain payment types that you make. And then I think companies just need to be more educated relative to the actual benefits of virtual ghost card payments. Again, you say, Ernie, you're not a check hater. Now you're a virtual ghost card payments, and that's okay. I'm not, but the good news is Ernie can learn. So you're going to have to convince me why I should tell folks not to be afraid of these things, given what I've said. Again, there are companies out there that do this right, but there are many more that don't. And don't let anyone try and hide information from your suppliers. You should be honest, authentic, and transparent. I think if we look at what's happened from COVID, we've all seen the value of being authentic and transparent. What goes around comes around, right? And then companies, you need to be more transparent relative to the cost, right, of accepting virtual ghost card payments. So let's collaborate with our suppliers, make sure they understand the costs and benefits. So AP done on, guess what? AP done right on your side is AR done right on their side. So we may have to get our treasury folks involved. And so there are benefits, right, to them. And so it's not just like we don't need to be trying to sneak things through. We don't need to hide things. We can be transparent and we can still have an impact on our company. And so it may be that they only accept a check. I'd like to have, well, if I could only get them to do a ghost card, I'd make this much money. Yeah, but what's the cost of that? What if you lose them? Right? As a supplier, can you really afford to do that? Is it worth it? It may be that you say, okay, let me first take them from a check. Maybe they'll do an ACH. We got to get them the backup, of course, for Cash App. And then maybe, we'll move them, right? And maybe they'll be in a place where, and I'm sure some companies have done this, right? They need the money, right? So they take credit card payments now. But and if they don't know, let's make sure that they understand the opportunity cost. You're like, man, I don't know if it's my responsibility to educate my suppliers. And I'm like, well, it's not your responsibility, but that's what a true partner does. And then companies also need to invest in collaborating more effectively with suppliers. And so again, I think technology can be incredibly powerful. We saw an example here. So some of the technology, we can communicate directly with your suppliers within an invoice. You can do that within a check, right, within an ACH once it gets to a certain point. And so collaborate effectively with suppliers. Also, I would add, 5A is invest in collaborating more effectively internally. And so what we need to do is we need to look at making the payments and AP process as efficient as possible for all parties involved. So looks like most of us on the call have done this, but if you've never mapped out your process kind of A to Z, I think what you'll see is you'll get a good sense of all the people and processes and systems involved, and then you'll start to see areas of opportunity there as well. So let me go ahead and I'll get the polling question a little later. Let's go ahead and I'll go ahead and take a couple of your questions. And the good news is I can take your questions still in the questions area of your GoToWebinar control panel. So feel free to go ahead and get your question in there for me. And so, okay, so someone asked cost of payment is an outbound disbursement. So we're talking in the AP world here. So we're talking about an outbound disbursement here. A couple questions around what do people usually miss in terms of the cost of a certain payment type. I would say usually what I see is that opportunity cost. So I don't think people, especially on the, like how much time people spend on the phone with supplier disputes. So I think sometimes people don't, so it's not really done till it's done. And then I also think the opportunity, the cost of not being able to take early discount. So it's almost a visibility cost, right? So you can look at, this is where we are now. This is kind of a pivot to the conversation, but when you're looking at the ROI of technology, you want to make sure that you're looking at the value, right, of that visibility. And sometimes companies are missing early discounts that almost always make sense for that, to take that discount. And then also, as we start looking forward, we're seeing solutions where you can dynamically negotiate. So suppliers can go out there, and you can say, man, I really got to get paid. Your suppliers might be like, man, I want to get paid. I'll take a 5, maybe they'll take the haircut of 3%, maybe they'll take 5%. So if you're in a cash rich position, then you can speed up your payments some, and that can be valuable to you. So I have a question, great question, around, to understand the actual cost and benefits of the virtual and ghost card payments. There's always some good research. I've come accustomed with G2 Crowd, so that's a good resource. Gartner is a good resource as well. What you want to do is, you might just type in, right, the actual costs and benefits of virtual cards. You have to be careful, right? Who's the author? What is their incentives? If you're going to a place that does business listings, let's be a little bit careful. But I think that the main disconnect that I see is that, right, when a ghost card payment is made, right, how much, what's the benefit to you, your company, versus the company that's trying to push you to do this, right? And then what's the cost, right, of your supplier to take it, right? And so you should look at that to them, right? So, you're making your supplier take a haircut. Do they know what it is? And so I think you want to look at all those things. And then you can also, your colleagues, right? And so, you have your colleagues, your treasury colleagues on LinkedIn. You might just throw out, hey, does anyone do virtual cards? And then they'll tell you, right? They'll be able to tell you, I believe on the cost side, those that are kind of out in front of this, but having those conversations. And I think we'll start to see this more. I'm on webinars, and we'll be digging into this more myself in further surveys, right? That I'm gonna do with my partner Stamply. So we're gonna do a series of surveys this year, and this may be something that we're actually coming around to. And speaking of what's coming next in terms of next survey I'm gonna be launching soon with my partner Stamply is we're gonna look at, right, okay, this is where we're at in terms of AP automation, right? Why are we here, right? Why did companies invest in AP automation? What are the benefits they really got out of it? What were they promised? Why are companies not investing in AP automation? And so we're gonna, again, I like to think of the thing Mythbusters, right? And so thank you to Stamply for allowing my thought leadership curiosity. But I put my treasury hat on and I'm like, okay, now wait a minute. So let's take a look. So this is getting so much attention. Again, the AP and payments are getting so much attention now. We need to do a better job of educating people. And so in order to tell people where to go, we have to understand where we've been, right? The why and the how. So why AP automation? Okay, you have AP automation. What's the functionality, right? What's your ROI? And so we're helping companies make more educated decision. And so, and when you're looking, if you're looking at an AP automation solution provider, a lot of us out here, I think 20%, maybe 15, 20% are looking. These are, hopefully I'm giving you some questions that you want to ask. And so the first thing they should offer to do with you is to have a discovery call with you. They shouldn't be pushing demo on you. I see demo as a relationship, right? So I tell my partners, and know Stamply does this, have a discovery call. Make sure it makes sense for them. So, and be willing to share, these are my problems, right? Let's be honest. If you're like, yeah, and they might ask you, do you do this? Well, I don't know. But the right partner will really dive in with you, and then they'll show you their solution. It's not the other way around. And so really what you want, I mean, I can call custom demo, but a lot of times it's demo, and they're trying to get demo calls. So I think that's an important piece. And again, for me, it's been incredibly insightful in terms of the things that I've learned in terms of checks, why checks, right? I think that's a big piece for me is I think I understand more why we write so many checks. Now I can help people understand, okay, how can we better educate people as to why you shouldn't stop that? But it's, again, there's two sides of the equation, right? Companies want to write checks, and right or wrong, they do. Suppliers want to get checks, right or wrong, and they do. And so there's a lot of opposing forces. So let me go ahead and launch our final polling question here. And then please let us know if you'd like to learn more, right, about maybe you're looking, all right, maybe you want information on how to make the right selection. You want to understand the technology landscape more, right? And maybe you want to take a look at your solution, right? You want to look at your solution and make sure that you're getting the value that you deserve. So that's something that I would absolutely do. If you've had your solution in place a year, over a year, especially, I take a look at that. Also want to let everyone know that we're thrilled. Treasury Webinars is going to be offering a full-blown virtual conference again next year, and that is going to be on September 7th through the 9th, 2021. We will keep you posted on that front. And so we're looking to offer, again, a full-blown conference experience, networking. We learned an awful lot the first time out. And I apologize to everyone that had to go through all of the virtual conferences this year that were far from an experience. They were webinars, they took weeks, they were Zoom meetings. And so we all have a little bit of virtual fatigue. And I can tell you on my front, I am looking to finally change my webinar platform. You guys are like, thank God. So I've been exposed to this new webinar platform where like it or not, you'll get to see my face, you'll get to see my amazing suits. If you attend our webinar tomorrow, you will be able to see me in one of my great ensembles. And so also I want to convey my appreciation to each and everyone in the audience. If yourself or your family and your friends are on the front lines of COVID, we certainly appreciate that and all that they do for us each and every day with you. Also want to I also want to thank Stamply, my webinar partner today, and their strong commitment to thought leadership is really incredible, and they really have a commitment to serving the Treasury and Finance, and of course the AP professions as well. And also, again, we'll get back in touch with you regarding the survey results from this survey, incredibly compelling. And finally, if you'd like any information about CTP credits or want to get a copy of the presentation, again, that's Ernie@treasurywebinars.com. Thank you so much, everyone, for your valuable time today. Make the rest of your day great.